Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Above the Haze. Eric Postel, Hold On Law Partners. With me today, George Monty, podcast host, author, True Life podcast, where he is serving as a bridge, a connector, talking to so many interesting people in different segments of sociocultural, historical life, and allowing us to learn from those conversations. George, welcome to Above the Haze. Thanks for being on.
Eric, I'm stoked to be here, man. Congratulations on the podcast. Thank you for the work you're doing. I know that you seem to be on tour and talking to people and helping us move the ball forward when it comes to seeing the world of cannabis and psychedelics in a new light, man. So thanks for the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. George, you were so gracious as a host when you had me on, and I just had to return the favor. You gave me the greatest introduction of anyone. I'd done a lot of different types of talking things, and nobody introduced me like that. So I wanted to give it right back to you. I want to jump right in. You know, for those that don't know, you've crafted a pretty serious following of your True Life podcast, and you're asking some of the more important and interesting questions that we can ask, which is in the space of psychedelics, in the space of plant medicines, in the space of consciousness, and where these social transformational waypoints are that are clearly having an impact and trickling down into our zeitgeist. Um, why? Why is that the case? How did you get to a point where you were doing this type of work? Which I guess your journey to now.
Thanks for the question. I think it has to do with asking questions. And one of the questions I began asking myself after my son had passed away and I reestablished my relationship with psychedelics was this question of what kind of life do I want to live? Why am I not happy? What's going on in the world? Like these questions are the kind of existential questions that kind of gnaw at you. And for me, it was what kind of life do I want to live? And I think we all get to a point in our life where, or it seems to me we get to a point in our life where we have to wonder what's meaningful. And that's what it was for me. Like I was living a life without a whole lot of meaning. I have a beautiful wife that loves me and she's intelligent, and my daughter's crushing it. She's doing really well. But I found myself in a position where I was just working to work. I was working at a place and I didn't really like the way they treated me. I didn't like the way they treated other people. And I began seeing that as a reflection of I don't like the way I'm treating myself. I'm not standing up for myself. So I saw that reflection in my workplace. And the question dawned on me, Eric, is, I was a UPS driver for quite a long time, and I began seeing people not sticking up for themselves. And I saw the people being treated like numbers. And this burning question began to build in me. And this question was, why will no one stand up for themselves? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks on a psychedelic journey. Why don't you stand up for yourself, George? And I was like, man, I get goosebumps when I think about it. And like that was the transition. That was the bridge that led me to start doing all this. And it just comes from asking questions and meaningful questions at that. So that's the
Yeah,
answer.
the meaning making thing, we explored that together in our
Yeah.
conversation on your show, and I'm hearing how unique and central to your being that comes from. You said, your son passed away.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I have three kids, and I can't imagine. So I express my heartfelt empathy and feelings for that. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to just explore that as a it would seem a pivotal moment, addressing the loss of a child, and then the meaning making as the transformational thing that occurred on the other end of that bridge. That portal that you went through there, that I'm sure you never asked for, and you never contemplated, and then there it was.
Yeah. It's there's so many similarities, whether it's in the mythology we read, the life we live, the people we talk to, but this idea of a death and a rebirth. And a lot of people talk about an ego death. A lot of people talk about getting to see the world with clear eyes. A lot of people talk about the hero's journey or the character's arc. But I'll tell you what, Eric, holding your son's dead body in your arms, I mean, that's a real life and death journey. To see all of your dreams, to see everything you thought, to see this life that you had in front of you, cold. To have doctors come in and tear that life away from you while you're clinging on, like that, it's a club I hope nobody ever has to join. But if they do join it, I will be the first one there with the advice and a warm welcome hug to welcome you into this. But that is also something happens to you. You know, it's an initiation. If you look back at, sometimes I think about Abraham, or you look at all these, Jonah and the whale, like there's all these biblical references to death and rebirth. And when something like that happens to you, you're initiated. You see things in a way that you will never see them again. The scales fall off and you realize it doesn't matter. You know what matters is your relationships matter. And psychedelics for me is a way of uncovering those relationships, because it's almost the same way neuroplasticity happens in your mind in a huge psychedelic trip, the same way people are getting over trauma. That's what happens in your brain when someone passes away, whether it's your wife, your father, your mother, and all of us are going to go through of it. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's your parents, but it's going to happen to you. And when that happens, you are given the ability to see the world with fresh eyes. And some people, they turn towards maybe they turn to something to coat it over. Maybe they turn to chasing money. Maybe they turn to alcohol. Maybe they turn to an outlet where they don't have to sit with it. But I'm glad that I did, and I hope other people do. It's worth exploring, and I understand the PTSD. I understand the people that are using psychedelics to get through trauma, because I did. And it can be cannabis, it could be psychedelics, it can be all of these things. These are tools to help us fundamentally shift the way we work our way in this environment. And it's happening. Like, you see this renaissance happening, and it happened in the 60s and it's happening now. We are fundamentally shifting consciousness. And like, this is why my podcast is successful. Like, I'm talking to really cool people about meaningful things. I don't got time for, oh, I wish I made more money. Oh, I wish I drove a Tesla. I don't got time for that. Like, there's people in the world that are knocking on the gurney. I want one more day. Let's figure out how to give the people that person's voice. Let's let that person has one more day tell their story to the kid so they can get through things faster. Like, that's the beauty of the True Life podcast. That's the beauty of all this communication. That's the beauty of having a connected world, the human mycelium, where we can pass information faster than it's been passed before. Like, that's what it's about, man. That's the beginning exploration to your question.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for going there with me, and for sharing that. All right, we're making meaning. We're thinking about things differently. We're understanding perspective shifts. We're considering the world that is and the world that's possible. We're in the magic of the possibility. We're noticing. So what do we notice? What are you noticing out there?
What I can tell people for sure is that the miracle of birth is a miracle, right? Because death can happen during birth. And what we're seeing right now is the birth of something new. And there's real need for people out there to do something meaningful. Like, this new consciousness that's emerging, this new sort of way to view relationships, this new sort of language that's forming. Like, I believe for the first time what's happening is that we, as a collective species, are beginning to understand how to communicate meaningful. If you look back at all the things that have happened in life, whether the wars or history, whatever that word means, it's people side monologuing or talking past each other. And it's not that they're mean spirited or that they're horrible people. It's just that we haven't had the right tools to convey meaning to one another. And when you can do that, when you can sit down with someone and have a real dialogue, and both of you can be open and empathetic and meaningful, you can get your message across. And that is where we're headed to, Eric. Like this meaningful dialogue that's happening. Like there's this science of semiotics that talks about the way in which nature speaks to us. And anybody who's been on a psychedelic journey that's, bumped up against the ineffable, well, you're bumping up against the new language that we're all learning. And it's happening to all of us at different times, but it's still happening to us as a species. I believe we are beginning to learn how to have meaningful dialogue for the first time. We're barely out of the trees, and now we're beginning to talk to each other.
Yeah, it's when I hear you say it, it's very validating. Because I sit in my space, in my universe, and I perceive these things, and I perceive what's going on in the world, and I come to similar conclusions that, in simple terms, the way things are is not sustainable. There are alternative future potentials. Increased awareness and perception will lead to more informed decision making. This in turn leads to more intentionality and therefore more intentional meaning making. And that relationship was the central piece in all of this. That relationship between each other, between self and place, between earth and animal, humans and plants, all of the different relatability that is necessary to live in balance can only be done when the driving force of the world, in terms of what the experience is like for the living things on it, is the one with the least amount of awareness and the least, intentionality, and or the most intentionality, but with blinders on and going in all sorts of crazy directions. And I believe that the psychedelic renaissance, the plant medicine space, the return of traditional sacred plant medicines, indigenous concepts, older and reestablished community center, relational strengthening, meaning making between people can lead to a different kind of experience here, and a more sustainable one, hopefully a more loving one. You know, is that feeling similar to what you think, or
Yeah.
any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's well said. I love the term awareness, and I agree 100% that this idea of awareness, like you don't know what you don't know, but when you become aware of something, you can no longer ignore it. You know what I mean by that? And like that is the fundamental change that happens to people that are going through therapy. It's like, oh, I'm aware of this thing. You know what? You know why I used to just do a bunch of blow is because I felt abandoned. And you know what? My dad felt abandoned. You know what? Whoa, look at this cycle that happened. Wait a minute. Okay, I still got to chill out on the blow here, but I mean, like, I know why I did it. And now I hate the reasons. I hate the way that this drug is doing things to me. I don't need to do it anymore because I just got to address this problem that I had with my dad. That's it. And once that does, everything else begins to fall away. It's the awareness. And I'll give people another example. A lot of people who find themselves using plant medicine, they get a new perspective. They'll see themselves in almost a third person point of view. It's not uncommon for people at high doses of psychedelics to live an entire lifetime or 3 lifetimes. You don't have to take my word for it. Check out the latest Lex Friedman podcast, or listen to Aaron Rodgers talking to Tucker Carlson. The idea of plant medicine and different types of awareness is permeating the culture. And when that happens, it's almost like that 100 monkey syndrome, right? Are you familiar with that? Where the people in Japan, they notice this one particular They went to all these islands, and one particular monkey on the third island was using a rock to crack open a shell. And by the time they got back to the next island, all the monkeys were doing it. Like there's something bigger than us that's communicating to us, through us, and it's probably happening through nature. Like the divine intelligence is revealed to us if you're willing to look. And as soon as I'm aware of it, I make you aware of it. The same way that people are coming back from retreats and coming to their communities and making everyone aware. I was talking to Sophia Dag yesterday, she's a really cool individual that's working out of Colombia, and she's doing some community building. She's a medicine woman down there. And I asked her almost a similar question. She has people coming from all over the world working on their own problems. So what is it like when someone goes to a foreign country, solves their own problem, and then comes back with the answer? It's like someone coming from the well with water. Hey, I'm bringing this back to the community. When they solve it, they can help other people solve it. And it's a snowball effect.
A few just more thought-provoking question. Is there a tipping point by which enough people have experienced what you're sharing about, psychoactive plant medicines, psychedelics, that enough of the population would be influenced so that you wouldn't even ever have to take a plant medicine or a psychedelic or anything like that, but you might start reverberating with a new consciousness because someone else did and they shared that with you and that started to resonate in a different way? Do you think the messaging and the downloading or uploading of information or whatever that's happening, the transformation that's occurring within that person, who then comes back to the rest of the community and says, this is how I see things now, that might start to resonate, thereby kind of 1x, 2x, 3xing the positive social impact or potentiality of the medicine?
Yes, however, I'm a forever optimist, and I believe that what's happening now is an incredible wave of transformation. But it's not unprecedented. There's a cool story, I think, that kind of sums this up. And I think in this story, I can tell you my hopefulness while at the same time explaining the potential problems we face. And it's the story of, if you'll permit me this quick runway of imagination here. Imagine a warlord that's rampaging through this, fiefdom, and he's making his way across the country, and he's brutal. And the only sort of resistance that he meets is with the religious aspect of this countries that he's rampaging through. So what he does is he makes a point to find the religious leader and just brutalize him, because that's the only resistance that he's meeting. Everyone else is afraid of him. So this warlord is taking his army and he's rampaging across this continent, and the places are realized that he's coming, and he finds himself at like the last stand, the last capital city, and he barges into the government doors, and they're like, "Oh, great warlord, everyone is so fearful of you, especially the religious community, and everyone has fled the kingdom except for one religious leader." And the warlord is furious. "You gotta be kidding me," he says. "There's a man daring to stand after everything that I've done. Doesn't he get it? Where is this individual?" And they're like, "Oh, he's waiting in the ashram for you." "What? The guy's waiting for me?" Spit's flying out of his mouth, and he finds the ashram, and he walks in there, and boom, blasts open the doors. He pulls out his sword, and he sees the monk standing there smiling at him. This guy's smiling at me. So he walks up to the guy, and spittle's flying out of his mouth, and he goes, Don't you have any clue who I am? Don't you know what I'm doing? Don't you know who I am? I could take my sword and run it through your belly at any second." And the monk just stands there. And he says, "And don't you know who I am? I am the man that could have your sword run through my belly without blinking an eye." And the moral of the story is, are we willing to fight? Are we willing to stand up and be that guy that's willing to take the sword? Because the rampaging idea of greed and selfishness will show its head, and it's going to force all of us to take a stand. Are you willing to stand up for what's right? Are you willing to say, you know what? Maybe I'll take a little bit less money. Maybe I'll live in a smaller house. Maybe I'll worry about my family instead of worrying about a million likes. What will you do? Will you stand up for it? And I think we're seeing it. Like we almost saw Kent State happen here at the schools. They're different, but you can kind of see a parallel there on some level. You can see the schools rebelling a little bit. And so I think we're up against a rebellion. I think that there will be a rebellion. And I'm confident that the psychedelic movement will move in that direction. What do you think about that story? Did I tell it okay?
Yeah, you told it okay. It's wild.
Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's also fair to account for the fear of exactly what you just described, and that sounds aggressive, and that sounds scary to a lot of folks. And psychedelics are a dangerous substance when done inappropriately or in the wrong hands or by unskilled hands, with wrong or bad intentions, or how do we address the true societal concern about the harmful potential while at the same time embracing the obvious positive social value coming from these experiences?
Man, that's the $1 million question. I was revisiting some of the work done at MAPS where they had they've got the MDMA therapy coming out, but there was a few hiccups there. There was a individual that had an inappropriate relationship with someone with whom they were providing the medicine to. And as I read through it, like I read through the accounts, I read through everything that Rick had to say, and I read through what some of the dissenters were trying to say. And one thing I think no one's talking about in the world of the medical environment or the studies is that if I am providing medicine to you, Eric, and I give you a high dose of psilocybin or I give you a high dose of MDMA, that has a radical effect on me. We don't know how to address that. Giving someone a substance has a radical effect on the person giving it to them. Like I don't know of any metrics in there. We can have people that watch and stuff like that, but it could fundamentally, if I give you something that fundamentally changes the way your pheromones work, or it changes the way in which your body reacts a certain way, like that changes me. We know that from the observer effect, like that, it changes me. So who's at fault there? If you're overcome by these feelings of desire that are, and you can read the accounts, like people that may have had sexual trauma happen to them, on one level, maybe it's good that they're with a therapist that cuddles them. Like maybe they need to relive that experience in order to fully transform themselves out of that experience. But where's the line at? Where is that line? I don't know, and neither does anybody else. So it is a gray area. What if this person is genuinely trying to help, but afterwards the person's like, that person touched me inappropriately? Wow, like that's a I don't know, man. Like that's where we're up against. Like we are up against these powerful substances, and we don't know how to deal with them, man. And I don't know who's right or who's wrong, and I want it to be better, but I don't have the answers, and I don't think anybody does.
Well, I think we can agree that there are still clear standards of expectations and boundaries, and I think that we can see line drawing for touch, even if it's unwanted touch, after the fact, and something clearly across a line that becomes sexual misconduct or assault or date rape or whatever truly poisonous thing that's occurring there. And I think especially when you're in a regulated space, there's clear standards of care, right?
Right.
And outside of that space, there's standards of decency. And then there's the peripheral where people are exploring a line further,
Yeah.
you know? And historically speaking, there were, religious orders, groups, things like that, that did take intimacy into different places to address, you know, those types of experiences and traumas and things like that. Is it wrong? Well, if you overlay our conditioned
Yeah.
perceptions about it, sure, it may not fit. But there's always been that exploration out there of people who are consensually doing it. And I think that that's the word. The consent and the acceptance and um, the joint mutual event that's happening. And I have no idea what even this is, but I'm just saying that we can draw lines. We should draw lines. We should make sure that people who hold medicine, whether a regulated Western practitioner or otherwise, that they honor the person that they're with and never dishonor them.
I got a question for you. When I look, I was speaking with Sherry Reyes, who's works with Enthea, and they're working on getting ketamine into multinational corporations' insurance plans. So people that maybe they have trauma at work, and they're arguing that, hey, this is going to help people be more productive. And there's this new, hopefully, we can find this way in which we can work these medicines into insurance programs and stuff like that. But I'm curious to get your opinion on what that might look like. On some level, I think like, wow, that might really wake people up. I'm almost reminded of the two books the two books of Brave New World versus The Island. On some levels, I could see psychedelics being this cool tool that institutions could use to help people be better. And on another level, I could see the Brave New World aspect of it, like, hey, come in for your morning ketamine meeting and don't worry about all these problems. It's like a dissociative. Do you see what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't know what my thoughts are on that. I don't think I've thought about it in just the way you framed it, but I think that what we're seeing in our increased awareness and knowledge of these things, microdosing, different levels of entry point, purpose behind certain levels. If you're doing a true high dose journey, there should be a reason for that.
Yeah.
How do you integrate these things into daily life? Unknown. Suppose it depends on what's happening in daily life and what the norms are and the standards of decorum, and is it healthy? Is it professional? Is it productive? Is it counterproductive? Is it harmful? To evaluate, whether or not something being integrated in was something that should be, supported or something that should be shunned. And we're really far out because I couldn't talk to a business today and say, let's imagine your psychedelic experience here at work. That's a crazy thing to say. But if we imagine where people are, and we take a spectrum of from microdosing to discernible levels of intoxication to high dose experiential journey, that all of them should be evaluated for set and setting. And there may be appropriate workplace setting. It's possible. There's a creative space, and the purpose of the setting was to be creative and to develop concepts that were novel, to strategize together at a different level of consciousness, to take yourselves to a different state of mind in order to achieve something that you could not get in a regular state of mind, an alternative state of consciousness. So I think that, that's a little bit of a windy way of answering your question, but I think that that's how I would evaluate that question,
Yeah.
and say that based on that, there clearly is a setting that's appropriate, that's professional and psychedelic.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Well, safety, right? Safety for employees, safety for the people involved, um, appropriate levels of that to achieve desired results while not emergency procedures, all kinds of things. There's not just something anyone should just go do, but if we're in the land of like, imagine what if,
Yeah.
those are the thoughts that come up. What do you think of that?
I
Did
think you
that
could
get to you?
argue.
Did that get to an answer that's works within your mind?
Yeah, but I think we could pull on it a little bit further. I think that you can already see it. I talked to a lot of people in the startup community, and you could argue that the startup community on some level, or the creators of today, have changed their cup of coffee for a microdose. And I think that you're seeing levels of productivity that are off the charts. I think
No doubt.
I think that this is
They've seen that in
right.
Silicon Valley for 10 years, 15 years.
Of course.
The Burning
Of
Man
course.
crew, the folks that have been a part of that scene who then go back to regular life, and I'm certainly not trying to generalize, but I'm trying to imagine, certain folks that I know that this would be true for, and then the tangible results, the metric.
Yeah.
There's metric around some of this stuff, and I think that's an interesting thing to evaluate too, a metric around success, professional success, creative success, whatever.
I love it. And if we're being honest with ourselves, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we can say that our society runs on drugs. We run on, every break room has a coffee machine. At least all the ones I've been to. So you're running on caffeine. Well, what does caffeine do? It kind of gets you stimulated, and it makes you productive, and it allows you to put a piece of metal on another widget, and you can stand there for hours and do it.
Sure.
What does psychedelics do? Psychedelics makes you go, you know what? I think there's a better way to do this thing. I'm gonna stand on the other side. I'm gonna use my left hand, and I'm gonna put this square thing on. Watch this. You know what I mean? And like, all of a sudden, we start asking ourselves, if our society is if the production of our society is based on the root drugs that we do, and we've been running on caffeine and nicotine and all these drugs for a while, what happens when we add this new drug in? And I think you're seeing it. I think you're seeing this explosion of creativity. Let's run a society on a different substance, different fuel.
Yeah, and that's a very radical idea for the drug place work policies, or workplace drug policies. I think you would call it the drug place work policy.
Yeah, I love it. We should write that. We should write the drug place work policy for the new age.
There you go.
That's a great book. We should put that out.
We just copyrighted it, so we own it. Everybody, don't take it. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point of view. Of course, when I consider the normal stream of life right now, that is an insane thing to say, and that we go by, it's illegal. Therefore, if you do it, you're bad, and we won't tolerate you here. But when you really get into what the drug policy should be is, how are you living your life? Are you a healthy individual? Are you a happy individual? Are you productive here at work? Are you a good team member? Are you contributing and adding value to our community and the community beyond? You take care of yourself at home? Like, that's the evaluation. I'm not going to stop and say, you've got THC in your system. You are scum. You're bad. You're fired because you broke our policy that makes no sense. But right? I
Yeah.
should, if I'm evaluating that though, I should be evaluating all of this, but I should really be thinking about drug policy on a broader level, which nobody's doing except for people like us sitting and thinking about it, and some other folks out there in the world. But I think you're right. If we're heading on this line or somewhere in that ballpark, and we're starting to see that these aren't drugs as we have commonly called them, they are tools.
Right.
And some of these tools may be incredibly valuable and beneficial. I'm going to frame it. In a
Nice.
world where AI is emerging and there's a lot of fear around it, what's it going to do to my job? How's it going to automate this? Where's it going to lean out? Maybe there's this other thing happening where the micro dosing and the finding those types of you know neuro advancing
Yeah.
molecules or medicines or things like that that create a rebalancing where the human minds become more creative, because the AI will never be able to be creative in that way. The AI is taking all of the creativity that we have you know entered into the data, and then churning things out, and it could be creative, but it could never be that kind of creative.
Yeah.
Something that was completely from the inner world, the divine center, the ineffable place, or
Yeah.
happening or experience or whatever, and then bring that back and say, I just came up with a novel idea that's going to solve X.
I love it. I think you're right on the money there. And I wish, and I'm hopeful after this conversation, if we put this out there, I think more people will think that way. Yes, the AI and psychedelics are emerging together because they have to. AI is the Library of Alexandria, and psychedelics are the evolution of mind that allows us to comprehend it.
Oh yeah.
They're working in tandem together, and now we're all the way back at understanding meaning. If you
Right. And that brings up, just my last guest, Dr. Paco Calvo, what he brought into the conversation, his book Planta Sapiens, discussing the science, the observable reality of plant intelligence.
Mhm,
And it makes sense.
it does.
It makes sense if you understand the true evolution of life on this planet, that there's a singular point where we're all related, where these intelligence forms came out of. You've got animal intelligence, you've got fungi intelligence, you've got plant intelligence.
Right.
What other intelligence are out there? Now, what's important about that? We don't understand those intelligence forms. We don't understand how to communicate with plant intelligence, how to do more than observe. We're learning. His team and others, they're learning how to integrate this kind of things, this knowledge. But when we do understand it and we recognize and respect the other forms of intelligence, and we stop thinking that there's human intelligence and then nothing underneath, no,
Yeah.
we're a part of an intelligence sphere, a space of earth intelligence,
Yeah.
which we should also start to recognize the earth has an intelligence. And isn't that what's communicating with us? And we just don't know what the hell it's saying, or that it even is. We just don't recognize it because we're not tuning in. And what happens when we do tune in? What do we do? Are we better? Are we worse? What do you think?
I think it's brilliant, and I think it's happening right now. Like the throughout time immemorial, the things that we can't explain have been called God. And so many people right now are tuning into things that are helping them become more aware. And I think once we get away from these silly words like this folk ideas like drugs, like what that's so dumb. How about plants as exogenous neurotransmitters? There's an idea. Maybe we need these in order to have the conscious ability to be aware of an intelligence that's trying to communicate to us. If you look at the way, if you get an ant doesn't know that there's human beings that can step on them. Like, but we right now, this is one of the most amazing times in history. We are being brought into the fold. Something bigger is communicating to us. Hey, for those of you paying attention, I got something to show you. Come on over here. What is that? I don't know. It's ineffable. Well, you can't explain something unless you have a linguistic pathway for it. We're going to need psychedelics. We're going to need AI, because you knuckleheads down here are going to start getting some new ideas and some new concepts so that you can start acting like a bunch of dumb knuckleheads, you know? So that's what's happening. This is evolution in real time. And I bet you if we could look at the EKGs or brain scans, or we had the technology to do it, we could see parts of our brain. You can do this. Look at the activity in the brain, the neural networks, the turning off of the default mode network, like that. Maybe that's what's happening. The default mode network is being turned off, and we're being allowed out of our boxes on some level. But you can see in the brain scans of people on high doses of psilocybin, everything's changing, man. And when that changes, doesn't that mean your outlook on life has to change? If you're processing visual information in Broca's area, or you're processing sound in the visual cortex, what does that mean? Well, that means you interpret the world in a radically different way. What if you're interpreting all that information in all parts of your brain? Like, that's what's happening, is we're opening our eyes for the first time. It's like we're being born again. We're back to the death and birth cycle.
And again, that's what scares people, isn't it?
Of course.
And I think we always have to acknowledge and validate the feelings of people that don't understand this stuff, or have an understanding that's heavily conditioned,
of course,
on the way we have been talking about these things. Drugs are bad. Schedule 1 means no medicinal value. Marijuana has no medicinal value. All right. Now, catching up, President Biden, the DEA, DOJ, the FDA, acknowledging marijuana has medicinal value. We need to go through a very long administrative process to change the rules. Thank you. This has been an important announcement from your government. It's like, oh, thank God. Thank God you got here. Wasn't sure we were going to make it, But that's the reality. Is like, the truth is the truth, no matter what lens we put over it. We may not get to the truth. We may not see the truth. We may not recognize the truth, depending on the lenses we have in front of us. But we can remove the lenses and get closer to what is true. That is the search for meaning. That's what we're here to do. That's why we have the gift called consciousness, so that we can become aware and aware and aware and aware and aware, and transform and change and be intentional, and bring about the things that are resonant across every life form. Loving, balancing energy, connection, relatability. I'm harmed, and I'm now going to harm everyone around me. We can't sustain life like that. We cannot continue to hold up a narrative that just seeks destruction in every turn. And I think that this is one of those things where the war can be won without firing a shot. All you have to do is become more aware. And then the intentionality, the caring about people, everything you just said. I don't need to make $1 billion. I need to make an impact. I need to make the world around me better. I need to care about my community. I need to care about my family, my neighbors. I need to care about whether or not I'm contributing to climate change. I need to think more connected, that It's probably a bad thing if all of the forest in the Amazon gets burned down and turned into volume cattle farms. You know, I think that we may just start making different decisions on our own.
Yeah.
I don't need to be manipulated from this side or that side. I can just know this stuff. I can see it and I can know it for truth. I've removed a layer. I no longer see the world the same way as I did before. Now I have a choice to make, so I can become more intentional. I can choose to ignore it or I can choose to not. And I think that was what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of the metaphor of the snake shedding its skin. When we look at money economics is something we've all needed our whole life in order to live a life with resources and provide, and that we providing is something that's hardwired into us, but maybe on some level we're we're beginning to change the definition of value in money. Like, I had this idea the other day, like there's all kinds of historical places that you can see that have signs of being abandoned. There's places in South America, or there's ghost towns in the United States that were just completely abandoned. I was watching this guy who was doing van life, and he's like, "This is an abandoned ghost town." There's like nobody there, and you start thinking like, I wonder what happened. You can go back and look at it, but in my mind, I got this idea like, well, that idea just didn't work anymore, and the people left. And I started thinking about some of the wealthiest people. I'm like, you have a $300 million boat. What happens when no one pays attention to you? What happens when the people that thrive on being noticed by being important are no longer important because no one cares? What happens to money then? What happens when people are like, you know what? I'm not going to work there regardless how much you pay me. I'm not going to do it. Well, you have to do it. Nah, I'll just go live with my in-laws, and I'll just live in this basement for a while, and I'll understand what generational living is like, and I'll be happy doing it. Well, I don't like it. I'm gonna bring in people to replace you. Really? Who's gonna do that? And I think we're seeing this rise of parallel economies show up. And it's in tandem with this new idea about value and importance and understanding. And it's in tandem with AI and in tandem with psychedelics. There's new parallel economies popping up all over the place. What happens when you're part of a community where you no longer need to have the validation of the authority figure that has all the money? Like, I think these are the ideas that the next generation is going to be able to play with and understand. And they're going to leave, like, as the older generation dies off, so too do their ideas, and I don't know. I think it's beautiful in some ways. And I think we're seeing it. I think you're going to see ghost towns and old ideas die off, and you're going to see people flee areas that were once really wealthy, and they're going to be fleeing them for things that don't make sense to the people that are already in power. And that's beautiful in some ways.
Right? Yeah, and that's how you effectuate real change.
Yes.
The migration,
Beautiful.
rather than the you know
The
coercion.
hurting. Yeah.
Yeah, so people wake up and they say, "Oh, I don't need to follow the herd. I'm going to go graze in the
That's
field over
done.
there.
I'm
It's got
gonna
a
graze over here.
lot of abundance."
Yeah.
um, I want to bring us to a conclusion. I don't, but I do. And I'm sitting here, thinking, what's a really great question for George? And I think that the best question for you is like, what do you want to see in the world? Like, what's your imagination of the way the world can be? What's possible?
Man, that's such an awesome question. I guess what I would like to see is, and this is what I try to do, and it's the old Gandhi quote of try to be the change that you want to see in the world. And when I started my podcast, I was like, look at Rogan, look at all these guys. It would be so cool to be able to like be be someone, or it would be so cool to be on that show, man. And then I went down this rabbit hole, and I think a lot of people do this, like, you know what, if I could just get that one shot at like being on the Rogan, if I could get one shot at being on the Tonight Show, and like everybody thinks if I could just get in front of that audience. And I used to think that, and then I was like, what if I could be the guy that gives everybody a shot? And you just flip it on its head. What if I could be the guy that brings on the new idea? That's even better. Then you, and somehow, if you just take a moment to sit with what you really want, be the change that you want to see. And I think the relationship with yourself and the relationship with your loved ones and the relationship with the environment will unfold in front of you in a way you can't possibly imagine. Like, that's what I want for people. I want them to become the thing that they want to see in the world. And it sounds so huge, but if you just take some baby steps, maybe that means get up, go for a walk in the morning. Maybe that's like, I'm not going to have any ice cream tonight. Whatever that first step is, man, be that thing that you want to see in the world, however small at first, and it'll snowball into a way you can't imagine. I promise you, it's the first step, man. And it's an actual way to do it. So that's what I want, man.
Well, that is awesome. George,
you are awesome.
Thank you for coming on Above the Haze. This was an incredible discussion, and I think we actually left the door open for a lot more, because we just scratched the surface of this well. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much. True Life, that's your podcast. I'll tune in. And everyone else, has been Eric Postel, Whole On Law Partners. See you next time.